Welcome to this discussion of the middle section of Hamlet. First, I'd like to discuss a few sections or quotes from Hamlet, a few ideas. And then for the second half of this, we're really going to get into the question of tragedy. What is Hamlet's tragic flaw? I'm going to give 4 ideas about that. All right, so first, let's get into a few select pieces or selections from Hamlet. Some scholars suggest that Shakespeare, and they suggest this based on evidence in Hamlet and other plays, that Shakespeare was really quite conversant with the new science of his day and the astronomy of his day, and that he adopted the new science, that he was a Copernican. Nicholas Copernicus printed his book on the revolution of the heavenly spheres in 1543. So that was just about 60 years before Hamlet was produced on stage. And that was the book in which Copernicus said that the sun is at the center of the universe, not the earth, and that things go around the sun and not the earth. Okay. Well, this presents a mathematical conclusion that if you put the sun at the center and you put the earth around the sun, what that does is it actually pushes the stars really far away. You have to have the stars almost to infinity, says Copernicus in his book. So it creates a universe that is an infinite universe. Now, this is a problematic idea for many people in the 1500s for a couple of reasons. One, Pascal, he said this. He said that it actually brought him horror to think of all of that extra infinite space, that it seemed wasteful, unnecessary to have all that space, and he saw it as something that he couldn't believe in. Okay. Another problem with the idea of infinite space is that if God lives beyond the stars and you push the stars to infinity, where's God? Where does that leave God? It actually pushes him out of the picture altogether. So those who were religious didn't believe Copernicus. In fact, we can count it on 2 hands how many people believed Copernicus by the year 1600 when Shakespeare produced Hamlet. So there were 8 people that we know of. And there are scholars today that want to make Shakespeare a Copernican, but I don't think that's the case. From my reading of his works, it's pretty clear that he held on to the traditional view that the earth is at the center of the universe and the sun goes around the earth. Nevertheless, I think he was conversant with some of the new ideas, and it shows up in the language in his plays. So, for example, this phrase of infinite space, that kind of a phrase, that idea, didn't even exist any time before 1600, before he wrote this play. So to have that idea and to put it in the play, yeah, I think he was conversant with some of these ideas. He didn't believe them. So here in Hamlet, this is when he meets Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. He says to them, "There's nothing either good or bad but thinking makes it so. To me, Denmark is a prison." And then Rosencrantz thinks that Hamlet is saying that Denmark is a prison because it's just too small of a place. So he says, well, there's much broader, bigger places. Why then your ambition makes it one? 'Tis too narrow for your mind. So Rosencrantz is saying you've got to get to a bigger place. And Hamlet's saying, no, that's not it. I could be in a very small place. I could be bounded in a nutshell, very tiny space or place, and I could count myself a king of infinite space were it not that I have bad dreams. So that it is his bad dreams that he has in Denmark that makes it a prison to him. That's what Hamlet is saying. But this little phrase here, he could count himself a king of infinite space, that is a very modern phrase that comes somewhat from the science of Copernicus. But that doesn't mean that Shakespeare was a Copernican, that he followed that idea that the sun is at the center of the universe. Okay, next passage. here's a question you can ask yourself this. Hamlet, it's pretty apparent that he's more comfortable with the player troupe that comes to visit the court than he is with even his own family and friends. Really pretty clear that Hamlet was probably an actor at one point. He has some lines memorized from a play, and he recites them to the players when they come. There are scenes that you saw when Hamlet is directing and coaching the players as to how to perform the play that he wants them to put on. Okay, so really pretty clear that Hamlet was involved in theater, that he was a player, that he was an actor. And when he asks the primary player to recite the story of Hecuba when she mourns the loss of Priam, he gets caught up in that emotion, and he sees the emotion of the player, of the actor, and he wonders this. He says, what's Hecuba to him, or he to Hecuba, that he should weep for her? Hecuba is a far distant character. If she was even real, she lived long, 2,000 years ago. If she's not real, then she's just a fictional character. Why would the actor get so emotional, get choked up, even cry in his portrayal or his description of Hecuba? Why would he do that? And that's what Hamlet's wondering. What would he do had he the motive and the cue for passion that I have? How would the actor act if he had the loss of a loved one, like his father, just recently, the way that I have? He would be even that much more emotional. I think Hamlet here is saying that it's kind of like maybe an excuse, or maybe just confirmation that, or justification, there's the word, justification, that he is justified in feeling the emotions that he has for the death of his father. All right, so here also it's pretty clear that Polonius was no good actor. He says that he was an actor at one point, but being the flat and static character that he is in the play itself, how much more flat and static would he have been as an actor on stage? But being a stable person is something that Hamlet aspires to. So he says this to Horatio. He admires Horatio for his steadiness. Give me that man that is not a passion slave, and I will wear him in my heart's core, I in my heart of hearts as I do thee. So he admires Horatio for being that kind of person, a steady person that's not given to his emotions at all time. Okay, there is the scene when Hamlet contemplates death, even maybe perhaps contemplating taking his own life. There's the rub, for in that sleep of death, what dreams may come. So he wonders what the sleep of death might be like. And he says, it's actually, we don't know. And we don't have really good evidence to know what it might be like. And in fact, it's for that reason that people don't take their own lives. The dread of something after death, the undiscovered country from whose bourne no traveler returns, puzzles the will. It is that dread that puzzles the will. And that's why people don't take their life for the most part, because of that dread keeps them from doing so. I'm going to pause here on this quote for a second. You may encounter this criticism of the Book of Mormon sometime during your lives, and there's different ways to counteract it, but I just want to show you the criticism, and here it is. Critics have said that Joseph Smith cobbled together books and things that he had read and seen, and cobbled together the Book of Mormon from these things. Okay. Included in that is the idea that Joseph Smith saw Hamlet or read it, and he memorized the to be or not to be speech by Hamlet, and he took part of the speech and put it in the words of Lehi. Okay. I think that's basically the most improbable thing I've ever heard, but here's the language that shows up in the Book of Mormon. It's in 2 Nephi 1, verse 14. This is when Lehi has gathered his family. He's about to die. He's gathered his family. He's blessed his sons, and he's teaching them. Awake and arise from the dust, and hear the words of a trembling parent, whose limbs ye must soon lay down in the cold and silent grave. The grave from whence no traveler can return. A few more days, and I go the way of all the earth. So he refers to the grave or the bourne, that's how it is in Hamlet, is the place from whence no traveler can return. You can see that, again, the second quote here. Can I hover over it? From whose bourne no traveler returns. So critics will say that Joseph Smith ripped off this language from Hamlet, put it into the words of Lehi. Okay, just so you know, what we do know is this, that in the ancient world, for the ancients, Phoenicians, Sumerians, Israelites, Babylonians, this metaphor of the burial slab or the grave as being a place from whence no traveler returns, that shows up in sacred texts and literature from the ancient world for all of these cultures. And Lehi would have been familiar with several of those cultures and of this language. So this is language that was around already in Lehi's day. So it's no surprise that he uses that same language for when he's talking to his family in the Book of Mormon. So there's really no substance or this is not much of a great attack on the Book of Mormon by critics of the Book of Mormon. Okay. When Hamlet kind of goes nuts on Ophelia and tells her to get to a nunnery, I think, in a way, this is my take on it, I think that Hamlet is trying to protect Ophelia. He's been acting crazy, right, to everybody. And this is a way to get Ophelia out of the situation by telling her to go away and to get to a nunnery. And he even says, why wouldst thou be a breeder of sinners? We are all sinners. Look at all this stuff that's happening. Why would you want to bring more of that into the world? Go to a nunnery, live a blessed life, get away from all of this mess. That's Hamlet's message. And I think he's trying to protect her. So, but in the end, it actually backfires and it makes things even worse. So Ophelia goes crazy because she loses Hamlet, her love, and she loses her father. Hamlet kills Polonius, and so she loses two of the people that are closest to her, and then she takes her own life subsequently. So there is the question, what did Claudius and Polonius see and hear? So Ophelia, after she's been thrown to the ground by Hamlet and he's yelled at her, she runs to Polonius and tells him. And he says, you need not tell us what Lord Hamlet said. We heard it all. But how much did they really hear? I'm pretty sure everyone heard Hamlet yelling at her and telling her to go to a nunnery. Pretty sure the whole castle heard that. So that's not a surprise that Claudius and Polonius would have heard that. Okay. But I'm not so sure that they saw the to be or not to be speech. In the film version that you saw, it shows Polonius and Claudius behind a double mirror, and they're kind of spying on Hamlet, and they see all of that. But I don't think they did. I think what Polonius right there is referring to is just when Hamlet was yelling at her. Okay, let's turn to Hamlet as a tragic figure. And I just want you to ask this question. I'm going to go over some possibilities. If you had to choose one tragic flaw for Hamlet, what would it be? I'm going to give you 4 possibilities, and if there was only one, you could only choose one of these, which one would it be? This all stems from this question here. Have you ever wanted something but failed to act? And then when you decided to act, the thing was gone. Perhaps you wanted to make a purchase some clothing or a collectible or something. And then you thought about it, and when you went back, it was gone. Or you wanted to maybe talk to a friend or a neighbor, maybe form a relationship. But when you got the nerve and the guts to do it and you walked up, they were gone, or they were already with someone else, right? I think this kind of thing happens to us all the time. So it's something that we can relate to with Hamlet. He's failing to act, and when he finally does decide to act in some moments, um, the the possibilities for him to have the life that he had before, it's all gone. All right. So what is it that's keeping him from acting? Here's 4 possibilities. One, maybe he just has kind of part of his DNA, his makeup as a person, one of his characteristics. Maybe he just has this aversion to act. That's what Samuel Taylor Coleridge said in the 19th century. He has an aversion to action that resulted from a world within himself. So he's just so caught up in kind of this insular world that he has in his mind that he has an aversion to action. Okay. Hamlet recognizes this about himself. He says that sometimes when he gets caught up, he loses the name of action in that second quote. And he could count himself a king of infinite space if he were bound in a nutshell. That's how broad and expansive his own little world is to himself. So why step out of that world and act outside of that world? So there's that aversion to action. So that could be his tragic flaw, his major tragic flaw. Here are a couple of other possibilities. Perhaps he's just too moody. I think it's a great thing to tap into your emotions, to have a sensitive side, to recognize those emotions, okay? But when you become absorbed in the emotions, especially negative emotions, this is problematic. You need to somehow get out of that in one way or another. And Hamlet gets too caught up like that, too caught up in his moods and his emotions, becomes absorbed in them. And that keeps him from doing the things that maybe he should be doing. Here's another one. Maybe he's too idealistic, maybe not realist enough, or maybe not enough of a skeptic. Sometimes he puts people on a pedestal that they shouldn't be on. He's really enthusiastic when he greets people and he meets them and he befriends them. Maybe he sees people better than what they are, even Claudius. But we know for sure that he put Hamlet Sr., his father, up on a pedestal. So when in the play, all we really know of Hamlet Sr. is what we get from Hamlet Jr. Maybe a little bit from Gertrude or the ghost of Hamlet Sr. We get to know Hamlet Sr. a little bit that way, but really it's from what we get from Hamlet Jr. And all we get pretty much from Hamlet Jr. Is this hero view of Hamlet Sr. So perhaps putting him too much on a pedestal. And then that's what keeps him from acting. And he puts other people up on a pedestal too. Okay. Finally, the 4th possibility is this is opposite of being moody. This is being too intellectual, too thoughtful. All right. Questions too much. He questions whether the ghost is an honest ghost. He does have the chance to kill Claudius right when Claudius confesses his sins. So this is right after the play within a play. Claudius goes to his bedchamber, to his private confessional, and confesses his sins and confesses out loud that he has killed his brother. And Hamlet happens to be right there when Claudius confesses his sins. And he could have killed his uncle right there and been justified in doing so. Right? This would have been a legal action of capital punishment against Claudius because Claudius is a murderer and has murdered his brother. All right. But then Hamlet says, well, what if I do kill him? What will happen? So again, he questions, he thinks about it, he ponders it, and he thinks, wait, hold on a second. If I kill Claudius, Claudius is right in the middle of confessing all of his sins. If I kill him, this will send him straight to heaven. That's a bad idea. I don't want him to go straight to heaven. I want him to suffer. So he doesn't kill Claudius in that moment. So I'm going to leave you with that. Think about those 4 things. If you were to choose one of those 4, and some of these are somewhat interrelated, but if you just had to parcel out one and choose it as Hamlet's tragic flaw, the thing that leads to his downfall, which one of these 4 would it be?